A war veteran inherited a forgotten stone house high in the Colorado mountains. Locals called it cursed, but one night his loyal dog uncovered a hidden chamber beneath the floor. As the ground trembled and the air filled with a deep hum, he realized it wasn't a curse. It was a miracle buried in stone, waiting for God's hand to awaken. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support truly means the world to us. The morning wind over Colorado's high plains carried the bite of winter and the faint smell of pine resin. The sun hung pale and low, brushing the frost-covered ridges of the Rockies in cold gold. Inside a small roadside cabin parked beside an abandoned gas station, Caleb Vance sat at a dented metal table, his calloused hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee gone lukewarm. Caleb was 45, tall and broad-shouldered, with a frame still hardened from his years as a Marine. His dark brown hair, streaked with silver at the temples, fell naturally unruly over a forehead marked by sun and worry. His beard, short but untrimmed, covered a square jaw that spoke of discipline turned to weariness. He had the quiet air of a man who'd seen too much and talked too little. There was a heaviness about him, not the kind that came from age, but from the weight of remembering. The war had ended, but echoes of it lived behind his gray-blue eyes, where every silence sounded like the desert wind. Beside him, resting on the worn floorboards, lay Kaiser, a 6-year-old German shepherd with silver-gray fur fading to white around his muzzle. He was a large, disciplined dog, the kind that rarely barked without reason. His amber eyes were alert, intelligent, but softer whenever they turned toward Caleb. Kaiser had been trained for military search work before an injury in service left him retired. To Caleb, he wasn't just a dog. He was what remained of loyalty in a world that kept moving without them. The cabin door creaked open, letting in a woman's voice and a gust of sharp air. Sarah Lowell, the mail courier for the region, stepped inside, brushing snowflakes from her padded jacket. Sarah was in her early 50s, tall and angular, with hair the color of storm clouds tied back into a strict bun. Her skin carried the weather of mountain life, wind-touched and freckled, but her green eyes were sharp and kind. She had a habit of talking quickly, as if trying to fill silence before it settled too deep. "Morning, Caleb," she said. "Got something for you. Certified letter, hand-delivered from Denver." Caleb took the envelope, his brow furrowing. He hadn't received official mail in years, not since the discharge papers that had freed him and shackled him at once. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, stamped with the insignia of Lawson and Briggs Legal Associates. The name in the corner read, Raymond Vance Estate. Caleb froze. Raymond. The name struck like the slow crack of ice. Raymond Vance, his father's younger brother, had vanished 2 decades earlier. Caleb remembered the man faintly. Tall, wiry, with dark eyes that never seemed to stop thinking. A civil engineer who'd left the city to live where the rocks breathe, as he'd said. Family gatherings used to whisper about him. Raymond's gone mad in the mountains, chasing talking water. His parents had called him a hermit, a lunatic, until his letters stopped entirely. Then no one spoke of him again. Sarah noticed the change in Caleb's expression. "Bad news?" she asked, softening her tone. Caleb shook his head. "Old ghosts," he murmured. He signed for the letter, thanked her, and watched her retreat through the falling snow, her boots crunching rhythmically until silence swallowed the sound. The cabin grew still again, the kind of stillness that pressed on the ribs. He slit the envelope with a pocket knife. Inside were 2 pages, one typed by the law firm, the other handwritten in fading blue ink. The official letter was simple, a notification that Raymond Vance had been declared legally deceased, and as his next of kin, Caleb had inherited a property in Silver Pine Ridge, a remote region deep within the Rockies. The property, it said, was a house carved partially into stone, maintained under automatic deed trust. The handwriting below was Raymond's, steady, precise, and eerily familiar. For Caleb, listen where the stone breathes. Caleb's throat tightened. The phrase repeated a fragment from childhood, when Raymond had lifted him onto his shoulders beside a river cave and whispered, "The earth speaks if you listen long enough." His parents had laughed it off, but Caleb remembered the conviction in the man's voice. Kaiser lifted his head, ears twitching. The dog rose slowly, padding to the window where snow fell in silent spirals. He stared toward the distant mountains, tail low but still, a quiet tension in his body. Caleb followed his gaze. The peaks were veiled in gray mist, the air vibrating faintly with the hum of wind against stone. For a moment, Caleb imagined he heard something under the wind, a low, pulsing rhythm, like a heartbeat buried beneath the earth. He folded the letter, slipped it into his coat pocket, and sat in silence. Part of him wanted to throw it into the fire, to stay with the known loneliness of the road, rather than chase a ghost's invitation. Yet beneath his weariness stirred a different ache, curiosity, and something dangerously close to hope. Maybe it wasn't madness. Maybe his uncle had found something worth listening to. Kaiser pressed his nose against Caleb's palm, eyes bright with something between concern and instinct. Caleb let out a long breath, staring at the fading mountains. "All right, boy," he murmured. "Looks like we've got somewhere to be." Outside, the wind shifted direction, carrying the faint scent of snowmelt and stone. Kaiser gave a low whine, almost a reply, and together they watched the ridge, silent, waiting, as if the mountain itself had been holding its breath for their return. By the time Caleb and Kaiser reached the lower slopes of Silver Pine Ridge, the sun had already sunk behind the serrated line of mountains. The last streaks of daylight lingered like fading fire on the snow. The road had long since given way to a rough dirt path, its edges crusted with ice and thorn bush. Kaiser moved ahead of the truck, his paws silent, nose close to the ground, tail straight like a compass needle. The dog had grown restless since they left the highway, ears twitching toward every sound, head turning at invisible cues, as if something ancient beneath the earth was calling him forward. Caleb felt it too, a strange pull in his chest, quiet but insistent, as though the air itself carried memory. The trail ended abruptly at a rusted gate half buried in snow. Beyond it, a narrow footpath wound upward through pine and stone. Caleb parked, strapped his worn canvas pack across his shoulder, and started the climb. His breath clouded the cold air, each step sinking into powder. Kaiser followed close, his fur speckled with flakes that clung like silver dust. The forest grew darker with each turn, branches interlaced above them, creaking in the wind. Somewhere deep in the ridge, water moved, the slow, hollow murmur of a stream imprisoned in rock. Caleb stopped once, listening. He thought of Raymond's letter. "Listen where the stone breathes." The sound seemed to come from below, steady and rhythmic, almost alive. It took them nearly 2 hours to reach the plateau. When the trees finally opened, Caleb froze. Before him stood the house, if it could be called that. Built half into the cliff face, it looked like an extension of the mountain itself. The walls were rough basalt, dark with age, streaked with veins of quartz that glimmered faintly under the moonlight. A single round window near the roof reflected the pale glow of snow. The front door, heavy oak reinforced with iron bands, bore a small brass plate engraved Vance 1976. Caleb brushed the frost from it with his glove. He imagined his uncle's hands, precise, patient, setting it there long before he was born. He pushed the door open. The hinges groaned like a sigh. Inside, the air smelled of dust, cedar, and faint traces of oil. The living room was small but carefully ordered, a table built into the stone wall, a stove, shelves lined with jars, books, and old engineering manuals. Everything was coated in a thin layer of gray, yet nothing seemed broken. It was as if Raymond had left only yesterday. A lantern hung above the desk, its glass still smudged with fingerprints. Kaiser sniffed the corners, tail low but wagging once. Approval or recognition, Caleb couldn't tell. The dog paused by a wooden trunk, nose pressed to its latch, then looked back expectantly. Caleb opened it. Inside were rolled blueprints tied with worn string, a field notebook wrapped in oilcloth, and a small metallic device resembling an old radio receiver. The cover bore an etched label, hydrophone receiver, Polners, blue thread. Year 9. Caleb turned the dial absent-mindedly, but it gave only silence. He flipped through the notebook, pages filled with measurements, diagrams, and notes written in his uncle's neat hand. Words repeated often: pressure flux, mineral resonance, sub-channel pulse. And once, circled in red ink, the phrase, "The mountain is breathing faster." He frowned, reading it again, feeling an odd unease settle behind his ribs. From outside came a distant rumble, the groan of shifting stone, or perhaps thunder rolling along the ridge. Kaiser stiffened, ears pricked. He moved to the center of the floor and stood still, one paw lifted slightly, head tilted. Caleb knelt beside him, palm resting on the cold flagstone. Beneath it, faint but unmistakable, something moved, a vibration, deep and steady, like a heartbeat muffled by centuries of earth. It wasn't just the tremor of wind or ground, it was rhythmic, alive. For a moment, Caleb forgot to breathe. He whispered, "You feel that too, don't you?" Kaiser's only answer was a low whine that echoed softly in the hollow room. The lantern's flame flickered, though no draft touched it. Caleb drew his hand back slowly, the stone still faintly pulsing under his fingertips. He sat in silence, surrounded by the steady ticking of unseen water. The house wasn't empty. It was listening. As the night deepened, Caleb unrolled his sleeping bag near the fire pit, staring at the stone walls glinting faintly under the lantern light. He thought of his uncle working here alone for years, trying to capture the sound of a living mountain, while everyone else called him insane. He wondered if the same madness now stirred inside himself, or if at last someone was beginning to hear the truth Raymond had died for. Before closing his eyes, he looked at Kaiser, who was lying near the doorway, gaze fixed toward the dark ridge outside. Snow fell quietly beyond the round window, and somewhere in the depth of the mountain, the stone kept breathing. Dawn broke pale and colorless over Silver Pine Ridge, the kind of morning where the world seemed carved entirely from frost and silence. Inside the stone house, Caleb sat hunched beside the table, a half-burned candle casting amber light over his uncle's notebooks. The night's cold still clung to the walls. Each breath came out as mist. Kaiser lay near the hearth, his chest rising in slow, steady rhythm, ears twitching at every crackle of fire. Outside, the wind slid through the canyon like a voice searching for something it had lost. Caleb had spent most of the night reading. The notebooks were filled with sketches of underground streams, diagrams of pressure systems, and notes written in the careful, logical style of an engineer. Yet beneath that precision was something deeply human. Raymond's growing obsession with what he called the living current. On the third notebook's first page in clean black ink, the heading read, "Project Blue Thread." The text that followed was both scientific and fevered, describing a natural water system that pulsed beneath the Rockies, moving not by gravity, but by resonance, vibrations that rose and fell like breathing. There were mentions of a company, Clearway Mining, whose operations overlapped with Raymond's survey zones. Caleb remembered the name vaguely from old headlines, an energy conglomerate known for aggressive drilling in remote terrain. According to the notes, their extraction tunnels had cut into the Blue Thread's outer channels, causing ground shifts and strange pressure anomalies. If they keep drilling, Raymond had written, the ridge will collapse and the water will die. The mountain's lungs will close. Caleb read the line twice, feeling the weight of its conviction. He could almost hear his uncle's voice in the cramped letters, measured, urgent, alone. He turned another page and found something unexpected, a small envelope taped to the inside cover. The paper had yellowed, edges crisp with time. He peeled it open carefully. Inside lay a photograph, faded but clear enough to see a younger Raymond, lean and smiling awkwardly, holding a small boy in his arms. The boy was unmistakably Caleb, maybe 5 years old, squinting against sunlight with a half-toothless grin. Behind them was the same round window, the same stone door that now stood just a few feet away. For a long moment, Caleb simply stared. He had no memory of that day. His parents had said they'd never visited the mountains with Raymond, that he'd been too unstable. The lie stung with quiet clarity. He rose from the chair and walked to the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. The snow outside had stopped, leaving the world eerily still. In his reflection, the faint outline of his uncle's face from the photo seemed to merge with his own. He wondered how much of Raymond's so-called madness ran in his blood. The family had whispered about it for years, his father's short temper, his mother's melancholy, his own restless wandering after the Marines. Maybe they weren't just broken people. Maybe they were listening to something no one else could hear. Kaiser's low growl pulled him from thought. The dog was standing near the trunk again, head lowered, tail rigid. He gave a soft whine and scratched at the stone floor where the vibration had come from last night. Caleb knelt, placing a hand on the spot. The faint tremor was there again, steady, rhythmic, but now stronger, as if responding to their touch. "Easy, boy," he whispered, though his own pulse had started to race. He looked back at the open notebooks and the fading photo, the evidence of a man once ridiculed for believing the earth could breathe. Every calculation, every word of Raymond's was a warning. Caleb realized this wasn't a story of madness. It was a message left for him. He felt a strange surge of duty rise within, something he hadn't felt since his last command post overseas. But this mission was different. It didn't involve men or war. It was about protecting what still lived beneath their feet. As the morning light crept across the floor, Caleb gathered the papers carefully, tying them back with the same frayed string. He tucked the photograph into his jacket pocket, close to his heart. Kaiser watched him, ears angled forward, waiting for a sign. Caleb stood and looked toward the ridge through the window, where the dark line of pines met the white sky. Somewhere out there, Clearway's drills had bitten into the veins of the mountain. Somewhere out there, his uncle had vanished, trying to stop them. Caleb reached for his coat and whispered, "We'll finish what you started." Kaiser barked once, sharp and resolute, breaking the silence. The sound echoed through the empty valley like a promise. And as they stepped out into the cold light, the ridge seemed to hum faintly in reply. The snow fell heavier that night, swallowing every sound outside the house. The wind pressed against the round window with a low, steady moan, like the mountain itself was breathing in its sleep. Caleb sat by the fire, half reading Raymond's notes, half listening to the faint hum that seemed to pulse through the stone. Kaiser lay nearby, restless, shifting his weight from paw to paw. His ears flicked with every tremor. When the wind paused, the dog rose suddenly and padded toward the far corner near the old trunk. Then he began to scratch. Caleb frowned. "What is it, boy?" he asked quietly. Kaiser didn't look back. His nails clattered against stone, rhythmic, urgent. The dog's body stiffened, tail rigid, as if he'd locked onto a scent no human nose could follow. Caleb joined him, knelt, and ran his gloved hand across the floor. The stone felt colder there, unnaturally so. He tapped it with his knuckles. A hollow echo answered. For a moment, He simply stared, pulse quickening. Then he went to fetch his tools from the truck. The metal scraper hit the seam of stone with a dull clang, sending flakes of dust spiraling. Beneath a thin panel of fitted rock, he uncovered a square outline, its edges set with faint rust, a hidden hatch. He wedged the crowbar beneath and pried. The stone groaned open to reveal a narrow passage lined with metal rungs descending into blackness. The air that rose from below was stale but dry, tinged with something metallic, oil perhaps, or iron. Kaiser whined softly, head tilted toward the dark. "Yeah," Caleb muttered. "I know." He fetched a lantern from the shelf and clipped it to his belt. The flame threw trembling light down the shaft. Step by step he descended, the metal cold beneath his palms. At the bottom lay a small chamber no larger than a storeroom, carved directly into the bedrock. The walls were smooth, reinforced with steel supports. A workbench stood against one side, cluttered with old notebooks, glass jars, and a reel-to-reel tape recorder coated in gray dust. Nearby, a heavy machine, part radio, part instrument panel, sat silent, its cables snaking into the rock itself. A handwritten label read, "Hydrophone Array, Blue Thread." The room smelled of oil and aged paper. Caleb brushed a layer of dust from the console, tracing its dials and switches. His hand paused over the recorder. The tape inside was already wound to the start, labeled in fading ink. Raymond, final log. He hesitated, then pressed play. At first, only static filled the air, broken by faint clicks. Then came a voice, low, steady, and unmistakably familiar. "If you're hearing this, then they've reached the inner vein. The drilling has started again. Blue thread is dying." The recording crackled. "Caleb, if this ever finds you, listen. Don't come looking for me. Don't waste your life on the man I was. Save the water. It's the breath of this mountain. If it stops, everything will fall." Silent. The tape hissed, then ended in a soft mechanical click. Caleb stood motionless, the echo of his uncle's voice hanging in the air like smoke. Beneath his boots, the ground pulsed once, a tremor faint but distinct. He placed a hand on the wall. The vibration was alive, faintly rhythmic, like the steady beat of a heart buried under layers of stone. He looked back up the ladder, where Kaiser's silhouette waited at the opening, ears erect, eyes bright against the dim light. "It's all real," Caleb whispered. His voice sounded smaller than he meant it to. The air below seemed to hum in agreement. When he climbed back to the surface, snowflakes drifted in through the open hatch, melting on the cold stone. He shut it gently and rested his palm over the seam, feeling the faint pulse through the floor. It was weak, yes, but it was there. The mountain was alive, and now so was its secret. The morning after the recording, Caleb decided he couldn't stay hidden any longer. The words of his uncle still echoed in his head. "Don't save me. Save it." He packed the old notebooks, the tape, and a few photographs into his rucksack, then whistled softly for Kaiser. The dog came immediately, tail low, eyes alert, the kind of readiness that came from years of shared solitude. Together, they descended the winding mountain trail toward the nearest town. Silver Pine Crossing, a settlement of perhaps 200 people, and a single main street where the snow never quite melted from the rooftops. The air in town smelled faintly of fuel and pine sap. Trucks rolled past, carrying mining equipment up the ridge, their wheels splashing through dirty slush. Caleb entered the small diner near the post office. Maggie's place, according to the sign, and sat near the window, his mind heavy with the sound of his uncle's voice. He ordered coffee, black, and spread the old map Raymond had drawn across the table. That was when someone spoke behind him. "You shouldn't be showing that here." He turned. A woman stood a few feet away, holding a metal lantern instead of a purse, its glass glowing softly with an LED core. She looked to be in her mid-30s, tall and wiry, with wind-burned skin and eyes the color of copper. Her hair was chestnut brown, pulled into a messy braid that had seen too many long nights in the field. There was a steadiness about her posture, shoulders squared, chin lifted, yet her expression carried exhaustion, born not from weakness, but from persistence. "Name's Elena Ward," she said quietly, sliding into the seat across from him without waiting for permission. "Environmental engineer. I've been tracking the Clearway runoff data for 3 months now. Your uncle taught me how to read groundwater oscillations back in college." Caleb studied her face, searching for deceit, but found only fatigue and sincerity. "Raymond Vance," he said. "You knew him?" She nodded once, her eyes softening. "He wrote to me after the board rejected his proposal. Said the mountain was breathing wrong. I thought it was a metaphor until I ran my first pressure tests." She pulled a folded report from her coat, graphs, chemical readings, and photographs of blackened creek beds. "They're siphoning mineral veins, the runoffs contaminated with manganese and oil byproducts. Locals think it's just seasonal discoloration, but the wells are turning metallic." Kaiser rose from under the table, sniffing the woman's boots, tail wagging once in approval. She smiled faintly and crouched to pat his head. "He's beautiful? Shepherd mix?" "Pure German," Caleb replied. 7 years old, smarter than most people I know. Elena smirked. "Then maybe he'll lead us to what your uncle was trying to protect." By afternoon, they drove back toward the ridge in her old Jeep, its rear packed with environmentals. Instruments, sensors, glass vials, and a portable spectrometer she referred to as the toy. Snow thickened as they climbed, blanketing the narrow road until the world turned white again. The house appeared just as Caleb had left it, silent and solid against the mountain wall. Elena raised her lantern, its beam slicing through the dim light. "Show me the site," she said. They examined the hydrophone chamber first, then moved outside. Behind the house, near the slope where the snow thinned into gravel, Kaiser suddenly froze, nose pressed to the ground. He barked once, sharp, and began pawing at the base of a small stone well, half buried in ice. Caleb and Elena cleared the snow until the circular rim emerged. Inside, a narrow tunnel of frozen water glimmered faintly. When Elena dropped a sensor probe, it beeped rapidly. "That's not groundwater pressure," she murmured, crouching to check the readings. "There's a pipeline here, modern alloy. See that sheen? Someone disguised it under rock." She dipped a sample bottle into the trickle, seeping from the side. The water shimmered dark, oily, with a faint metallic scent. Caleb took a cautious sniff and recoiled. "Smells like engine oil." Elena's expression hardened. "They're dumping extraction waste. This isn't just contamination. It's deliberate. They're poisoning the ridge to drain the minerals faster." She stood, snow clinging to her gloves. "Your uncle wasn't paranoid, Caleb. He was the only one listening." The light from her lantern flickered across their faces as snow began to fall again. Behind them, the mountain loomed silent, but the faint vibration beneath the ground returned, slower, weaker, as if struggling to breathe. Elena looked up toward the ridge. "We'll record everything," she said firmly. "Samples, footage, data logs. If we can't stop them here, we'll expose them everywhere." Caleb met her gaze, feeling the weight of purpose settle over them both. "Then let's start tonight." By dusk, the wind had turned violent, carrying shards of snow that struck the cabin walls like needles. The blizzard rolled down from the peaks without warning, swallowing the forest in a white roar. Caleb and Elena worked through the howling wind, cataloging water samples and sealing vials under flickering lamplight. Kaiser paced near the window, uneasy, his thick silver-gray fur bristling with static from the storm. Outside, darkness pressed against the glass, thick, restless, and alive. The power lines had gone down hours ago, leaving only the orange glow of Elena's lantern. She stood by the table, her features half-shadowed, cheekbones sharp, eyes wide with focus. The storm had stripped away her composure, revealing the stubborn intensity beneath. "If Clearway knows we're up here," she said, voice low but steady, "they'll try to destroy the evidence before dawn." Caleb gave a grim nod. "Then we don't wait till dawn." Around midnight, Kaiser growled, deep, guttural, the kind of warning that made Caleb reach instinctively for the pistol holstered at his belt. The dog's gaze fixed toward the slope behind the house. Through the swirling snow, faint beams of headlights flickered in the distance. 2 trucks crawling up the ridge, their engines muffled by the storm. Caleb killed the lantern. "Company," he whispered. Elena's jaw tightened. They pulled on their coats and moved toward the rear window. Through the snow haze, they saw 3 figures climb out of the trucks. 2 carried heavy drilling tools wrapped in tarp. The third held a clipboard, his parka marked with the Clearway mining insignia. Their movements were tense, hurried. They weren't here to collect data. They were here to seal something. Elena exhaled sharply. "They're going for the well." Caleb nodded once, eyes narrowing. "Then we stop them." He signaled Kaiser, who crouched low, blending into the snow like a phantom shadow. The storm worked in their favor, masking sound and scent. Caleb circled from the right, boots sinking silently into the drift, while Kaiser crept closer to the men, waiting for the cue. When one worker bent over the well mouth, Caleb moved, grabbing him by the collar, dragging him down into the snow. Kaiser lunged, knocking the second man flat, teeth bared, but controlled. The third tried to run, but Elena cut him off, holding the lantern high, its beam slicing through the storm. Caleb pressed the captured man to the ground, a stocky worker in his 40s with stubble and frostbitten cheeks. His breath came out in ragged clouds, his eyes wide with fear. "You don't understand," he gasped. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We're sealing the vent. They told us it's unstable." Caleb's voice cut sharp. "Who told you?" The man hesitated, then whispered, "Your uncle tried to stop it. Raymond Vance. He went down there months ago. Never came back." The words hit harder than the wind. Caleb's grip loosened slightly. "He's alive?" The man shook his head. "No one saw him again. There's another chamber, lower than the first. He locked himself in when the pressure built. Said he'd buy time for the ridge." Elena exchanged a glance with Caleb, realization dawning. "There's a secondary system," she said. "He built a pressure relief. That must be what the blue thread was connected to." They forced the man to lead them toward the base of the ridge, where an old vent tunnel gaped under a sheet of ice. Inside, half buried under frost and stone, lay a narrow steel hatch. Faded letters read, "Emergency Access. Hydroline B." Elena knelt, brushing snow away, her gloved fingers trembling. He must have died trying to reach this. She pried the hatch open with a crowbar, and together they descended into a small, frozen chamber. The air was thick with minerals and silence. Near the wall, sealed in wax paper, lay a letter inside a tin box. Caleb opened it with shaking hands. The handwriting was unmistakably Raymond's. "If the blue thread stops singing, open the secondary valve beneath the west plate. The mountain will heal itself. Don't fear the noise. It's life returning." Caleb swallowed hard. He knew this day would come. Elena wiped her face, nodding. "Then let's finish what he started." They found the valve, a rusted wheel embedded in the rock, marked with his uncle's initials. Together, they turned it. At first, nothing happened. Then the mountain groaned, a low, thunderous sound that grew into a deep vibration beneath their feet. Water roared through unseen channels, shaking the walls. Above, the ridge trembled as if drawing a breath after years of suffocation. Elena shouted over the noise, "It's working!" When they climbed back outside, the storm had broken into swirling silver mist. The air was warmer, alive with the hum of released pressure. Far below, through the clouds, the lights of Clearway's pumping station flickered once, then went dark. A muffled crash echoed from the valley, followed by silence. The mountain exhaled. Kaiser stood beside Caleb, fur rippling in the wind, eyes gleaming with something almost human. Recognition, perhaps, or relief. Caleb whispered, "It's breathing again." Spring came to Silver Pine Ridge like a quiet forgiveness. The snow retreated from the cliffs in thin ribbons, revealing the dark green of pine roots and the cold glitter of thawing streams. The mountain, once suffocated by the weight of drilling and secrecy, now breathed freely again. From the cabin's round window, Caleb watched sunlight spill through the valley like golden smoke. The silence felt different now, alive, generous, no longer burdened by fear. Weeks had passed since the night the ridge awakened. News spread fast. Elena's report, backed by the footage and samples they had risked their lives to gather, had reached federal investigators. Within days, the story became national. Clearway Mining was forced to suspend all operations under criminal investigation for environmental sabotage. The Colorado State Council issued an official decree. The Raymond Vance Water Reserve, established to protect the Blue Thread and its surrounding ecosystem. For the first time, Caleb's uncle's name appeared in print, not as the madman of Silver Pine, but as a pioneer who had given his life for the living mountain. Elena returned to the ridge 2 weeks later, driving a different truck now, plastered with environmental agency logos. She stepped out with a stack of field notebooks and the same steel lantern that had guided them through the storm. Her hair was tied back under a canvas hat, and her cheeks were windburned again from long hours outdoors. There was a lightness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, the weary defiance replaced by quiet triumph. "They've agreed to fund a permanent research post," she said, glancing toward the ridge. "And they want you to be the caretaker." Caleb smiled faintly, the kind that came from deep inside, the kind built on closure. He'd already decided to stay long before anyone asked. The stone house had become more than inheritance. It was a promise kept. Kaiser padded out from the porch, tail wagging lazily, muzzle silvering with age, yet eyes bright with calm authority. He had weathered every storm beside Caleb and seemed to sense that his duty, too, was nearly complete. Elena crouched to scratch his ears. "He's earned his retirement," she said softly. Days settled into rhythm. Caleb repaired the old roof, cleared the overgrown path, and helped Elena set up her new instruments near the stream. They spoke less than before, but their silences were full of meaning. Sometimes, as dusk fell, Elena would light her lantern, and the two of them would stand together, listening to the hum beneath their feet, the faint, pulsing voice of the mountain. One morning, after she had left for the week, Caleb returned to the lower chamber. Dust motes swam in the slanted sunlight. He brushed the hydrophone clean and flipped the power switch. Static filled the air, then slowly cleared into a resonance, deep, luminous, layered like a choir of unseen rivers. The sound was unmistakable. The Blue Thread, singing again. Its tone rose and fell, rhythmic, alive. Kaiser stirred beside him, ears twitching gently, as though the melody belonged to some ancient memory only animals remembered. Caleb leaned close to the speaker, his voice barely a whisper. "Uncle Ray, I can hear it now." The words dissolved into the echo of the room. The sound of water filled every crack in the stone, every memory that still lingered. Outside, the mountain exhaled through the pines, and the house, half rock, half heart, stood firm against the wind. It was no longer just a relic. It was a monument to loyalty, to faith, to the invisible thread that bound the living and the gone. The mountain was singing again, and this time someone was listening. In the end, this story isn't just about a man, a dog, or a mountain. It's about how faith can move even the silent stones of this world. Sometimes God's miracles don't arrive with thunder or fire. They come as quiet voices in the wind, in the loyalty of a companion, or in the courage to protect what is pure. The same divine thread that revived the mountain still runs through our own lives, if only we stop and listen. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, loyalty, and redemption. May God bless and protect all who listen for His quiet miracles.